Welcome to Under the Microscope. I am your host, Jenny Germano. Thanks everyone for joining me today. Today's topic is going to be building cannabis cultivation operations from the ground up. Before I dive in, just a little bit about my background. I got my start running and operating vertically integrated cannabis operations in 2009 in Denver, Colorado. And then in 2015, I founded my company, 𝗖𝗍𝗄𝗃 Consulting, and I've been helping cannabis operators navigate the regulatory landscape for the last 10 years across the United States. Let's go ahead and meet our next guest for this week's episode. Let's give a warm welcome to Jeremy Shechter, the founder of Open Source Horticulture. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jenny.
Why don't you go ahead and give everybody a little bit about your background, what you did before the cannabis industry, and then your journey to come into the cannabis industry and what you've been up to?
Sure. Yeah, I've been in the cannabis industry almost a decade, in horticulture for a little more than that. I've been doing consulting for the last 4 years, going all around the country, working with operators for facility design, project management, construction, and then actual hands-on plant operational management and training and staffing and things like that. Before I did that, I was in the Ohio industries with Buckeye Relief, one of the largest producers in the state, and was on the initial team for that. And eventually became vice president of operations for that facility. So learned a whole bunch about the industry there. And then before that, I had a small stint in renewable energy and wastewater treatment, believe it or not, and commercial production of greenhouse vegetables, leafy greens, lettuce, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, stuff like that. And probably the most fun horticultural thing in the world of aquaponics until I really got started with plants was through aquaponics and raising plants with fish. Fortunately, I'm not doing that these days. I do miss my fish quite a bit. That's my background and engineering degree from Ohio State.
That's right. All right. Go Buckeyes. My brother is a graduate of Ohio State and he's a huge Buckeyes fan. That's amazing. And the fish part is really cool. There is a facility like that here in Colorado, not cannabis, but I believe they grow lettuce and tomatoes and different greens. And when you go in, you see the fish. It's open to the community. You can go in and tour it. They have a little grocery store. And it's so cool to see the fish. I think that's so fascinating.
Yeah, I think that might be the aquaponics source.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I just actually met those guys a couple weeks at the aquaponics conference. Yeah,
You know which
the
one I'm talking
sellers.
about in Denver then? Or I believe it's Denver metropolitan area.
Yeah, I haven't been to it. I know of it, but yeah, that one, I think it's been around for quite a while.
Yeah, it's really cool and I love you can come in and do tours. It's a really interesting facility to check out. Let's go ahead and dive in. I kind of want to start around the philosophy of how you approach cultivation. And I wanted to discuss the biggest misconception operators have about this like secret grow formulas.
Yeah, this is honestly the best possible segue you could have given. So back in my aquaponics days, I met the guy who wrote the textbook on recirculating aquaculture. His name's Michael Timmons, and he had this quote. I took a class under him. He had this quote, and it was, "In aquaculture, there are no secrets, only egos." And that was so long ago, and it stuck with me because it was true in aquaculture, and I think it's also true in pretty much everything, but definitely horticulture and cannabis cultivation. At the end of the day, we're just playing with science and learning, but using horticultural and biological and physical and chemical principles. And so it's really scientific principles and learning about it. And so when it comes to growing, there's a lot of ways to do it. And I'm not out here saying that there's one better or worse way. Everybody's facility is a little bit different and
Yeah.
everybody gets a little bit different results with different genetics and everything. And so it's the whole idea of the open source and being transparent is trying to make that like good, objective information accessible to as many people in the industry as possible.
No, that's wonderful. I really like that. And I think it's important to have that transparency. So, my next question is from the vision to facility design. And what are the short term and long term costs of delays when you're building or retrofitting a facility?
I love this question. I don't know where this is going to go, but this is probably the most impactful and my favorite question to talk about. And just the way you phrase it, short versus long term. So the short term effects is, it's hard to tell this, but when you actually start running the numbers, it becomes super apparent. A flower room can produce hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars per harvest if the room's big enough. And so if you break that down into months or weeks or days, typical flowering is at 9 weeks or 2 months, it's tens of thousands of dollars of loss per day when there's a construction delay, or when anytime that room's empty, it's tens of thousands of dollars a day. So it's unbelievably important to make sure that your scheduling and your planning and your coordination are really buttoned up, especially with this crowd. In addition to that, specifically with new markets, there's a little bit added nuance where, as most markets have come online, there's an enormous marketing and branding benefit to being first to market. So having a really dialed in speed to market approach and mindset can really set you apart from your competitors and get more space on dispensary shelves and things like that. The long-term effects of like construction delays, but really more of, I'll call it like poor facility design, is that you have to live with what happened. So going back to the whole planning thing, when I'm working on facility designs and working with clients on new facilities or expansions or whatever, there is an enormous amount of time spent on things that people who haven't operated in the space or haven't managed large facilities might not think about.
Yeah.
Really maximize productivity and workflow and minimize steps, and while also maximizing biosecurity. It's really important to compartmentalize all the different rooms and to like really think through the flow of a facility so you can plan how are cultivators getting into the facility, how are they getting into their scrubs or Tyvek suits or whatever. So locker room design and egress and ingress and the gowning areas are really important. But then, for example, you really want your post-harvest area separated from your cultivation area with a clear delineation. So then you're not accidentally cross-contaminating dried product with growing product and inoculating with pests, or if you need to battle a pest issue or a mold issue or something, you can do it. So there's just a lot that goes into it, a lot of thought, a lot of planning. And was it Warren Buffett had a cliche thing of a failure to plan is planning to fail? And
Yeah.
it's just a lot of planning on all sides.
I think that's really important. And I've been in some of these facilities where you can tell obviously everybody has plans, because in order to get licensed, you have to submit your design and your plans and everything like that. And I'll see automatically that maybe they didn't think about cross contamination. And I see people going from these wet, humid spaces into dry spaces where dried and cured product is stored, or maybe that they didn't give them enough space in like the gowning or the decontamination area, the clean rooms where they're coming in, and there'll just be this little space, and then they have to walk through a hallway and then into the locker room. But I'm always thinking, this hallway is connected to all the other rooms. Why is the locker room all the way down the hallway? Why wouldn't it be more in the beginning so they can get into the clothes or their gear or whatnot, whatever they're wearing? Some places are different, and then walk out into the hallway that's connected to all those rooms. And obviously I'm not an expert when it comes to cultivation, but I do understand cross contamination very well, and so I always see those pieces.
Yeah, I would say the vast majority of like initial plans that I look at, especially if it's just a lot of times people hire like local architects because of relationships or trust or whatever, but they might not know what goes on in cannabis facilities or what the important things are. And yeah, all the time. Sometimes I've seen this on a bunch of occasions where the shipping and receiving area, or like a loading dock for a truck, is open up to the cultivation area. And so you're just open up right to the outside in like right next to a flower room, which is obviously,
I've seen it myself. Yeah.
but definitely the biggest thing. That one, it happens. It's less common, but what is the most common is not following a flowering plant from the grow room to harvest to a separated harvest area, because harvest is really messy, to the dry room, to a pure room or a burping room. You know, how it follows from cultivation through post-harvest to packaging. And it's, yeah, so it's just one of those things, making put like paths on the actual drawing to see where it goes, make sure there's no crossing over. But my favorite class, and this is going to sound super nerdy, but my favorite class in college was linear algebra. And like, that's all it is. It's like a big puzzle, and you have these things that you need to know that you want, and you got to figure out how they all fit in together. And then once they fall into place, it's so satisfying and beautiful. Just like putting a jigsaw puzzle together.
I do not do linear algebra. However, I do puzzling, and there is no better satisfaction than completing a puzzle. So I understand that feeling. Were there any other missteps that you might see cultivators make when they build or retrofit a facility? I know we talked about like the design and how we're connecting to the workflow of all the different stages of growth in those rooms.
I certainly have a laundry list of them, of things I see a lot in facilities. The biosecurity one is certainly by far the biggest, but just a couple little things that people tend not to think of that are really important. Keep in mind that working in cultivation facilities is working in a hot, humid environment, doing a whole bunch of manual labor. It's hard work. You're back there in a windowless room for a long time, pruning, defoliating, harvesting, transplanting, doing whatever. And so what's really important is having access to drinking water.
Yeah.
So at every facility that I design, I make sure to have built-in water fountains, so I don't have to bring in like the big 5-gallon jugs back if possible. And then also having accessible bathrooms in clean areas. So the last thing that we want people to do is go from a clean area and their scrubs to a dirty area where people are in street clothes just to use the bathroom, which we all have to do all the time. Even having that kind of delineation is super important. People forget about those a lot, and they're super important.
I like the water station idea or the water fountain. Let's just say if somebody is like listening and their building's already built. So I would assume they could install some water stations or something in these different rooms instead of the idea of people leaving a clean room, walking through a high traffic hallway to go to a break room to get some water and then not decontaminate and then walk back through these high traffic common areas and then back into this clean area that they're working. I think everyone's so caught up in their workflow and what they're working on and or their role in that cultivation. And I could see how people think I'm in my scrubs, I'm clean, I've decontaminated, and it's out of sight, out of mind, and I'm just walking all over the place in the cultivation facility.
Yeah, I see a lot of, and this is more operational than design, but even if it's design, right, a lot of times I'll see people in facilities in scrubs. So the facility is paying the money for the scrubs, and the company specific shoes are usually Crocs or something similar.
Yeah.
But then they're in a front office in their scrubs and not scrubbed out, or a lot of times even going outside in their scrubs. So I always work with cultivators about having to be in scrubs in these areas, and you're not allowed to be in scrubs in these areas, and really drawing those lines to maximize the biosecurity. And this one's less biosecurity and more operational. And this one might have of the highest impact of design, and that's actually having offices back in the clean areas. So most facilities that I go to, they don't. And then as like an upper level manager, and this one is for all of you directors of cultivation out there. A lot of directors of cultivation I'll see have offices up front in the main area with the sales team, marketing, the executives, the C-suite. And that's good. And it makes sense from a business hierarchy standpoint. But at the end of the day, what that's going to do is create a separation from the person who's responsible for all of the cultivation activities and what's going on out there and the actual cultivation itself. And I feel extremely strongly that the person who's in charge of all the plants and managing the plants needs to be back in cultivation with their people. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of guessing and questions, and you just won't be accessible enough. So if you are a director of cultivation and your office is not inside cultivation, you're not spending the majority of your time in cultivation with your people and being accessible, just that extra level of separation is enough to like really reduce productivity and yield and quality.
Agreed. And I've seen situations where they are not in that space and where they're somewhere else located in the building. And then the workers are nonstop walking through multiple rooms, walking through high traffic hallways to go into this office, which might not be clean, right? Because it's not in the clean space. It's like a whole area of production where maybe it's just bags and bags of product that's getting ready to get packaged for wholesale. I've seen a lot of different scenarios. So actually those are some really good ideas.
About the efficiency losses, if people actually do, the supervisors or the staff, they make the step to go out there, they're losing all that time of just walking. But anytime something is slightly harder to do, it's way less likely to actually happen. So even though it's not hard to text or call somebody for a question, they're going to ask way more questions and get you way more involved if you're in cultivation. I feel really strongly
I
about
love
that.
it. I'm actually glad you brought that up. That's really helpful. And so, how do you balance a client's creative vision with the operational realities of building a cultivation facility? This is a good one, I think. I'm sure it
So,
happens a lot.
yeah, and that is an unbelievably good question. And it's something I'm excited to talk about. I've worked really hard, like over my time in consulting and an old colleague of mine had this thing that he always reiterated is to meet people where they are. And then I added on to that to get them to where they need to be. And I think that's really important. Everybody has a little bit different vision. They have different budgets, different infrastructural constraints, different markets and the implications with that. There truly is no one size fits all for cannabis cultivation, not to mention just like indoors versus greenhouse versus outdoor. But it's, I guess, if there's like really wonky stuff, then it consulting is a whole lot like sales. And I'm not talking about like selling a product, getting the buy-in to change what you're doing or to do something different or to follow my recommendations. And so a lot of it is just somebody's got a really crazy idea that I know won't work, then I have to like actively sell them of why it won't and kind of work to disarm their ego and make them comfortable and trust me. And if they still want to do that crazy idea, then what I will do is make sure that it's going to be the best that it possibly can. If somebody has an indoor facility and wants to use like a bucking machine, like I would not recommend doing that if you're planning to sell high quality flower, because it's just going to
Shred.
unnecessarily destroy it and lower your quality right off the get. But there's a million reasons why somebody would want to do something. So I just work with them to make it as good of an implementation as possible. Work around the labor and the data tracking and make sure that it gets put in and the SOPs around it are running correctly and yada, yada, yada. So there's a lot of give and take and just like understanding human behavior and psychology, and we're all prone to it. You're prone to it. I'm prone to it. Yeah. It's all over the place.
I think it is the meeting people where you're at. That's been my philosophy for 10 years, that it's just important to meet people where they're at. And I love that you added on to get them to where they need to be. I need to have a t-shirt that says that. That's so great. And I knew that was the secret sauce a long time ago, because it's hard to be templated and cookie cutter, at least for me as a consultant. Sure, I can have templates and all these things, but at the end of the day, I feel like every project is thoughtfully curated. And I'm sure you would agree for yourself that you can have this plan for how you do a cultivation, but once you get in there to their dreams, their creative vision, you're bringing your skill set in, what you're good at, because you're the expert. You're the one who sees things through your lens and how all the gears are moving and how it works together, that they might not have that insight. And so you have to find a way to beautifully bring that in to get them to see what you're trying to share and your concept and your ideas. And so it is this balance act that you have to do while you're meeting people where they're at in these projects and build out. So I'm really glad that you said that. For the next piece, I want to kind of dive into the launching operations, staffing, SOPs, and training. And so, why is the satisfaction of employees so important, and not only for positive culture, but for the ROI, which is return on investment, in case people don't know that acronym, and how can you get it?
So this is like the most fun podcast ever because
Yeah.
these are like my favorite things to talk about because they're so impactful. And this one, I take back what I said earlier. This one's, I think, the most important and probably my favorite. Cannabis is, speaking specifically of cultivation, is an incredibly labor-intensive plant, at least how it is now. It is, I see no current pathway to actually fully automate this like you would lettuce. There's a lot of touching, a lot of, I've mentioned pruning, defoliating, harvesting, transplanting, whatever. Most of it is not automatable. Certainly the pruning and defoliating isn't. And not to mention the trimming. There is machine trimming, but even with machine trimming, you still have post-machine QCing. But a lot of places are still doing a lot of hand trimming, and I support that quite a bit. Labor is the number one cost in just about all facilities. Maybe it's different in California because of super high energy prices, but labor and energy are number two. Usually labor is number one. And so cannabis is all about people. It is totally about people. And a hill that I would die on is that the success of any cannabis business is based on how good, not how good, but how their employees are treated.
Yeah.
I'm not even talking about some of in the news, there have been a lot of unionization efforts and things like that across different states and markets and facilities. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about the kind of the bare minimum in a facility, treating workers like people, treating them like adults, giving them a sense of job satisfaction and fulfillment.
Yep.
Making sure that they know that they're working towards something and that they're in this together. I mentioned earlier, working in a cannabis facility, you're working in a cultivation facility. You're literally in an indoor facility. You're in a box that has no windows on purpose under artificial lighting for 8, 10, 12, maybe even more hours a day, doing manual labor. Like, it is tough. You're doing what you love. You're around cannabis plants and there's a lot of passion, but that novelty wears off. I'd say 3 to 4 months, at longest 6 months before you're like, okay, this is pretty much on repeat. So you really have to, it's up to operators to understand that and to make sure that their employees are satisfied and are happy with the work that they're doing, and they're getting that job satisfaction. So what that does is it directly relates to yield and quality and profitability. So there's not millions, but many studies that have reinforced this over the years, books on it and yada, yada.
In all industries.
Yeah, all industries. And since this is so about people, we don't have machines automating this work. If you have employees who don't care and don't want to go above and beyond and are just dragging their feet, the plants aren't going to get pruned and defoliated. The irrigation isn't going to get tuned and dialed in. Nobody's going to be paying attention to like all of the environmentals and really digging in and trying to solve problems. And then on the other side, there are a lot of potential places where profit can be leaking out, from like flower to popcorn to trim ratios to like mold failures or other contamination issues to just like general data capture. And so it's really important to have just like an understanding of humanity, and more specifically behavioral psychology. And part of that, this is probably like, I'm sure somebody listening is, yeah, I understand that we need to treat people like people, but how do we do that? How do we motivate people? And I will say it's like, of course, money and incentives and stuff are one thing, but I think if the only tool that you have to get somebody to care is monetary incentive, you're missing the whole shtick here. As simple as setting goals and clearly communicating those goals and like celebrating in small ways, like achieving those goals, is unbelievably powerful. It's just how our dopamine system works. So here's an example. Seen a lot of cultivators, and on their trim team, they'll have active trimmers, and I'll walk in and be like, okay, so what's the plan for today? Like, how much does, Sarah or Jim have to trim, or what's the goal for today? And the trim manager says, whatever we can get done. And that is so demoralizing. If you were to go on a run and just be like, I'm just going to run until I get tired, or I'm just going to run. And it's not how our brains work. But if you were on a run, you were like, all right, I'm going to run 5 miles. And then, oh, I did that in whatever, an hour. Then the next time you go on a run, you'd be like, okay, I did it in an hour last time. Maybe I can do it in 58 minutes this time. And so not only does it feel good to hit and achieve that goal, then setting those goals, you can make them smaller and smaller, like very incrementally smaller and achievable over time. They need to be attainable, but that's how you can. And if you tie that with some kind of like simple, it doesn't even have to be monetary, but some celebration or gift or something, then it really motivates people as individuals, but it also really ties the team together.
Yeah.
And I know I've been talking for a while and going on a tangent, but
Oh man,
like
I'm
it's,
so pumped right now. You have no idea.
I'm,
I'm
I'm
just like losing it on the inside. This is great.
I'm really excited. The other thing that's important about this is, so I've actually been talking with people about this a lot in vine crop production, for instance, which is what a lot of operators look at. We know how to grow tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers, but the work related to that kind of production is very independent. A person goes out and prunes up the tomato plants and yada yada. It's one person. You can do competition. You can track individual metrics against workers and stuff like that. Not in cultivation. I think that's an enormous difference that people need to realize, is that in cannabis cultivation, just about every task, unless you're doing a pest spray or monitoring irrigation or something, all of the big tasks are incredibly team oriented.
Yeah.
So like goals and incentive structures and tracking structures, they all need to be team based. And I can say this from personal experience. I've tried doing a competitive thing where, individual metrics, and it breeds toxicity within the team, and people end up being more, understandably, again, we're humans and like this basic psychology, but more focused on their own benefit instead of the team, and then the team suffers. And so, yeah, fostering a really strong team culture, not making individuals compete with each other within cultivation, and being really liberal about setting goals. And it's like those simple things that can take a really toxic and unproductive cultivation facility and just transform it to blast off. So that is the 𝗨.
That is so awesome. That's just exciting to me. You're definitely speaking my language. And it's really why I love what I do and why I am very operationally focused, because just like you, I have worked these operations and I know what it's like to be in their shoes and to have incentives thrown at me, and not have things goal oriented. And I think a lot of things really that you talked about spoke to me, and I think having structure is really important for employees. Employees thrive in structure. I have to know what I'm working towards in order to work hard for myself. I have to be this way in my own business as an employee. If there were no goals for me where I was working, I had to make sure I had my own goals. What was I working towards in running these facilities? When I was running these facilities, I knew I was going to be a consultant. I was on a mission to learn all I could about cannabis operations in the early days because I knew I was going to start my business in 2015. And I think you have to provide that atmosphere. You can't just throw pizza. And I only say this because this is the biggest complaint that I get from employees that work in cultivations is I'm sick of them just buying pizza every week. Is there something else I can get besides pizza? And not that pizza's a bad thing. Who doesn't love pizza? It's not just buying them pizza and giving them extra cash or rewards. It's like helping them plan for their future. Why am I in here working hard for this company? What does it mean to me? And I think they lose steam after 6 months. I think you're right. That period that you talk about, they lose steam because you're in there every day doing the same thing. And sometimes you're walking down these very narrow aisles where you've got plants on both sides and you're in this hot space and you're in these confined spaces. There has to be a level of engagement operators need to have with their employees.
You actually brought up something that's really important, and so I don't want to stop talking about this yet. I think that's cool. So the pizza thing,
Yeah.
and they're getting pizza every week. I think that we're like everyone working in these facilities, we're adults, we're all smart, like they're all keen to things. I don't know a better way to put it, but it's impersonal. It's getting like I don't know, like a Visa gift card for your birthday. It doesn't mean anything. It's not thoughtful. It's stuff like that is an executive or something who's not connected to the day-to-day workers being like, oh man, people aren't happy. We should get them pizza. And it's not meaningful. The workers can see it and it has the opposite effect. And so it's more of executives shouldn't be making any decisions regardless, except the big company-wide ones, but like department specific. I typically recommend that a budget is given to like the direct managers to then do what they see fit and be empowered to think about ways to reward and incentivize their employees. In cultivation specifically, a really important philosophical thing that everybody who is serious about cultivation needs to have is that although it is manufacturing, it is farming. And in farming, plants don't take holidays off, plants don't have weekends, and they don't stop growing. You don't leave until the work gets done, period. And like without exception, and that needs to be reiterated in job interviews and the expectations set from the beginning that, hey, if we need to finish pruning a row or we have a goal for the day, we're not leaving until it's done. And that needs to come from the directors of cultivation and the upper level management on down. Because that can be a separating factor a lot of times. I've never operated a facility of any kind, whether it was vegetables or cannabis, where a goal would be missed. If the schedule says we're going to transplant on this day, it's going to happen, or there's going to be a contingency plan where production's not lost. You know what I mean? And because of that, like super stringent necessity, it is like doubly or triply important to make sure that there's a good, clear goals, strong, thoughtful incentives, and just overall buy-in to the cause of what the business is doing.
Yeah, and I also think the communication piece, right? So every day is the team getting communicated. Before we put our heads down into our work, did we have a little team meeting before everyone spread out amongst their jobs in the facility? And I think those meetings are very vital and they should be at every shift. There should be a team meeting, depending. Some places they have rotating shifts, and you get into manufacturing people, they have graveyard shifts. I don't know if they have graveyard shifts at cultivations because the lights they usually go off when people go home and whatnot, the cycles. So I know it could be a little bit different. But no, I think those are all really good points.
And I think what the biggest skill that, cannabis operators and higher level managers really need to build is frankly empathy.
Yeah.
Because like you said, every cultivator I've met, we're all adults, we're high functioning adults, we're all people. We all know what's going on. We can see through the crap. You can't put yourself in their situation. What would inspire you to go above and beyond and do the things that they want you to do?
That's why I do this podcast. Like, it's really important to put context out there and have different people on and different perspectives. And maybe for somebody who's thinking about launching a business or as a business, maybe there's something in these episodes that they'll hear that they might not have heard before. So that's really my hope.
I have a really hot take, and a lot of people aren't going to agree with it, which is great because this isn't a debate. The people listening can't argue with me, so I can just justify it. And so what I'm about to say is not theory. I have done it really successfully in the facilities that I've implemented this kind of policy are still doing it and have had tremendous success and productivity gains that beat any facility that's not doing it. Are you ready for this hot take?
I'm ready.
The one thing that people value more than money is time.
Yeah.
Without exception. And people value their time so much that a lot of times they're willing to give up money. Not all the time, but it is an unbelievably strong motivator. So I mentioned the farming mentality. We need to get this stuff done. We are not leaving until it gets done. There's a flip side of that where I think you probably see where I'm going with it is, okay, this is what we're going to get done today. If you get it done before the end of the shift, you can go home. And I've played with iterations of not paying people for if their normal out time is 4, but they get done with whatever they need to get done with at 3. Paying them for that hour or not, it doesn't really seem to matter. Mm-hmm. But like, this is a really powerful thing with cultivation teams. This doesn't really apply to like salaried employees and specialists and stuff like that, because they're always going to have more time, or they always have more things to do.
Yeah, they do.
But for like cultivation teams doing all the pruning, defoliating, harvesting, transplanting, it is unbelievably powerful. And even for trimming teams, putting quotas, hand trimming, once you get to 3 pounds, you can leave. Or you can stay and get a bigger bonus because we really need you to trim 3 pounds today. Mm-hmm. But that, if anybody's looking for a way to incentivize people and is willing to break the whole 40-hour work week mentality we have, I promise you it works, because it has worked for me, and it has worked for the managers that have worked under me. And it's cool. It's hard to sell to people.
Yeah.
It's such a coded thing, that, if they get done early, we need to give them more stuff. Turns out that's pretty unmotivating for people. The work expands to the time allotted to it. So just shrink it, make your people happier.
I have to say, it's true. When I was in dispensaries and they would do the schedule, I would always volunteer to work my 40 hours in 4 days, because I got more than 2 days off. And it was nice to have those 3 days off back to back. And I got more time, and I didn't care that I worked 40 hours in 4 days, because I knew that I was going to have those 3 days off. I think it is true. And I think you have to get creative. And how do you get employees more time? I kind of want to dive into common pitfalls and lessons learned. So how can operators set themselves up to be more proactive instead of reactive when problems arise? This is something I see a lot across all license types.
I'm going to take, since we haven't really talked much equipment stuff, and I do a lot with equipment, I'm going to take that question there.
Okay.
There is a large industry-wide problem of preventative maintenance on equipment. It's the vast majority of places I go to, or I've been to, not necessarily my clients, but I've been to a lot of facilities that I'm just visiting or whatever, and they tend not to have robust preventative maintenance programs on their HVAC systems, their water treatment and filtration, filter cleaning, irrigation systems, light validations, and just even like flushing hot water heaters or whatever. It tends to be really lacking, and what ends up happening, and it's lacking for a reason. It's not because I am not trying to say that people like aren't doing what they're supposed to do, but if you think of like how a cultivation facility typically goes, a lot of times, like somebody will, like an owner will hire somebody, maybe it's their first door, maybe it's a consultant or something that'll design and spec out this facility. And then 6 months later, that person's not there and somebody else takes the reins. So stuff falls through the cracks. So it's not necessarily anybody's fault, but like a lot of times cultivators or operators, they don't even know the full suite of equipment that's in their facility because for whatever reason. But anyway, so what ends up happening is without the preventative maintenance, we see a lot of preventative maintenance in like cleaning is part of preventative maintenance. See a lot of premature equipment failures and a lot of extra money spent on fixing the thing that broke because you didn't maintain it. And like all of this stuff, like backwashing filters and cleaning filters or cleaning salt off of metal parts around if you have salt leaks or whatever. There's a million and one different things. Greasing bearings, whatever it is. The analog that I like to use, and I say it all the time, it's if you bought a Lamborghini, then, and you didn't change the oil, then, it's going to die. Just like people spend tens of millions of dollars on these nice, unbelievably nice cultivation facilities, and then they effectively don't change the oil. And yet things breaking all the time and critical systems too. So preventative maintenance is huge. I work with a lot of clients to identify what their preventative maintenance needs are. I find it so important, Jenny, that at the beginning of this year, I was actually considering starting a national preventative maintenance firm specifically to address this and help people because there's just been so many war stories. Luckily, there's another company that I work with that is actively doing that. And so we're working together a little bit on that. I didn't have to go through the pains of starting a whole second business. I've got busy enough. I want to do it. I just want it to get done.
Yeah.
And I want people to be helped with this. But it's enormous. And I mentioned the critical systems, and that's what the big thing is. It's not somebody's chair isn't getting maintained. It's like the HVAC system. And then if the HVAC system doesn't work, you can lose a whole round, and that can be enough to kill your whole business. So it's of enormous importance, and it is something that is a big thing that.
So should that just be like, who does that fall under? Because I think of a bunch of things when it comes to cultivation facility. I think the cleanliness, and I think about all the equipment and the maintenance of the building, the roof, all kinds of things, cameras and the HVAC system. Is this just on the cultivation manager? Do they have a checklist? Is there something they're checking on weekly? And like, how do they tackle that? Because there could be a lot of moving pieces. I feel like a lot of times operators aren't thinking about this maintenance program that they should have, or maybe they assume, oh, everybody on the team, they're all out there cleaning all these things, but there's a lot of building maintenance in general and equipment maintenance and your lights, and you were talking about greasing bearings and all these different things, and it's not something you just keep in your head. I would think that you would have some kind of checklist or a program that you're establishing.
This comes down to, I would not put this on a manager level position. This is the responsibility of the chief operating officer or like the general manager. They are absolutely, the ones responsible for it. And if stuff's not getting done because the preventative maintenance isn't scheduled or planned or thought of, that's on the top operation guys in the facility. Yeah. And I would say who is functionally responsible for it, that's going to vary depending on the size and scale of the facility. A 5,000 square foot facility likely isn't going to have a dedicated maintenance manager or facilities manager, whereas a 100,000 square foot facility should have a full maintenance team handling all of that. And I would say the smaller facilities, maybe like 20,000 square feet and under, a lot of it can fall and does fall onto the director of cult, but any larger than that, and they have plenty enough to deal with, that they should really trust that the vast majority of their maintenance is out of their hands, or they could delegate it. Say a facilities team necessarily needs to be involved in the maintenance of like irrigation components for the most part. Mm-hmm. If your facility is large enough that it warrants a dedicated irrigation person or team, then that team absolutely need to be handy enough to handle the maintenance of their own equipment, because it needs to happen like immediately. If a pipe breaks or something, but your fertigation person has never used a pair of channel locks, oh, that's a problem. Or doesn't know how to just glue PVC or how to grease gaskets or something. Like they need to know those skills. But
Yeah.
I guess it just really depends.
I think that's all really helpful. So I kind of want to dive a little bit into the future of cultivation and industry shifts. And where do you see the industry heading next? And specifically, we're talking about cultivation.
So I was just at a really awesome conference last week. It's PhotoX. It's this conference that Fluence puts on every year to kind of show off, to talk specifically about this. And they're a lighting company, but it's not a sales thing. It's not about lighting. And what came up a lot was awesome, because it was what myself and a lot of other cultivators have been talking about for a long time. And that is the difficulty in like genetic variation and just how all over the place the breeding is, and from everything from the stability of seeds and genetics, the quality of breeders and the genetics that we're getting commercially, the even down to the naming conventions of different cultivars is so untrustworthy. A lot of states, you can name things whatever you want to name them, and sometimes, so like in Ohio, for instance, and I was just talking with some folks about this the other day, how crazy it is. They have regulations that say that the names can't be offensive, or they have to sound medical, or they can't be for children. So then you take a name of something like
Thunder bleep.
yeah,
That's a good one. Or cat piss. Isn't there one called cat piss or something?
Yeah, well, there's cat piss, there's cheetah piss, but or even something like 𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗃, for instance. They didn't like chem, so they had to change it, and then you completely changed the name, and then all of a sudden, what you had was 𝗏𝗀𝗃, and now it's Dexter's Lab or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just like nobody knows what it is, and there's no traceability. And I met this cannabis legend, and he had a really good way of putting it. And he was basically saying, we need some kind. This is going to be obvious to the cultivation listeners that you have here, but on one side, this one's more controversial, but we need like real protections for the breeders to protect their IP, so that people don't steal the hard work that they did.
Sure.
That's great. A little bit controversial, but what I think is the most important and the most universal thing that we can agree on is that just if I go to the store and I buy a Snickers bar, I want to make sure that Snickers bar I can expect that it's going to have caramel and peanuts and chocolate and nougat or whatever's in a Snickers bar. But I know that Snickers bar is a Snickers bar. It's just I want to go to a dispensary, and if there's sour diesel, I don't want it to actually be like a gelato or something and totally off the wall.
I'm the same way. Like I'll buy Blue Dream, and I'm like, it's not like the Blue Dream I remember. And Blue Dream can be different everywhere you go. So I understand.
Well, that's actually probably a much bigger conversation.
We don't have another hour, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm just like how genetics have changed, why like things don't taste the way and smell the way and have the same terps and everything that they used to, and getting back to that. But that's a whole nother thing. We just need it to be like predictable, and we need to know what we're getting. So genetics and standardization and some cool things that are up and coming. I think we're probably getting out of time, so I'm just going to throw them out there. Polyploid breeding is a big deal, specifically breeding for triploids, which means three pairs of chromosomes, which triploids like bananas and watermelons are seedless because they're triploids. So odd numbered polyploids are seedless. And polyploids tend to have like higher secondary metabolites, bigger buds, bigger leaves, yada, yada. So triploids are the holy grail of polyploid breeding. And then also a group, and I won't talk too much about it, but they identified the genome that's responsible for powdery mildew resistance. And I guarantee a bunch of listeners' ears just perked up in excitement. I can tell you it's real, and they're working on incorporating that into active breeding programs. And I'm going to leave the day ambiguous, but it's breeding, genetics, and all of that. dialing that in is what it's going to take to really get this industry to the next level.
I love it. And we got a little nerdy at the end. Nerdy meaning like there are a lot of things I didn't even know what you were talking about near the end. But that's okay because I'm not a grower. And so I'm learning as well on this podcast. And wrapping up, if you could leave operators with one piece of advice about launching or improving their cultivation operations, what would that kind of last bit you'd want to give to them?
Probably the biggest thing is going back to the operational stuff that we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier and having empathy with your employees and putting yourself in their shoes and remembering that these people are working for you and making you successful, but they have their own dreams and their own ambitions and their own emotions. And
Yeah.
there are real ways to treat them that is a mutual win-win that makes them happy and proud to work for your company and also makes them more productive, which makes it more profitable for you. So it's not a zero-sum game. We can have very happy, fulfilled, productive employees, and we can also have higher profitability, better quality product all together. And quite frankly, it's not that hard. It just takes real effort and thought.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was perfect. And thanks for everything that you've shared. And I really appreciate you coming on my podcast. This is going to be really helpful, I think, for people who want to listen and learn more about cultivation or somebody who's already cultivating and running a facility. So thank you so much for being my guest today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay.
This podcast, it is streaming on Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Or please feel free to check out my YouTube channel, which is Under the Microscope with Jenny, and go ahead and subscribe. Thanks everyone for listening, and thanks again, Jeremy, for being a guest. I'll have Jeremy's information also posted in the description section in the podcast and on YouTube as well.